Imagine a student enrolling in her first year. It all starts with the credentials for the administrative portal, which are needed to upload documents and complete the enrolment process. Once enrolled, the student receives a welcome email from the student office and an invitation to register on the department's e-learning platform, which is a different system from the administrative portal. Once lessons have started, one of the lecturers shares some updates through yet another system that only he uses. All useful information, but delivered through different channels and at different times with no coordination whatsoever. If we think about it, this fragmentation isn't an exception, it's the norm in many of our universities. Welcome to the university communication ecosystem. In this lesson, we'll try to understand what elements it consists of, how it works, and why it's so difficult to keep it coherent. Only by understanding how information moves within the university can we then intervene with suitable tools, including those based on artificial intelligence. A university is not just a place where teaching and learning happen, it's a complex communicative organisation. Every day, documents, messages, and content are produced across many channels. Yet it's rare for anyone to stop and ask whether the communications are consistent with each other, clear to those who receive them, and if they actually reach their intended recipients. This shows that university communication is often not designed in a systematic way. It's improvised, repeated, and accumulates over time. And this leads to situations where messages are sent out that are not aligned with each other, or even outright contradictory. Let's take a concrete example. The student office updates the instructions on the website for applying for international mobility scholarships. New deadlines, new forms. The guidance office contact then communicates the previous version to students, the one they saved months ago. The tutor answers questions based on a guide from last year that was never updated. Three people acting in good faith, three versions of the same process. The problem isn't the competence of those communicating, but the lack of a system that keeps communications connected, until someone starts to wonder why the messages aren't getting through or aren't being understood by the various recipients. University communication is structured on three distinct levels. The first is educational communication, which takes place in the direct context of teaching. Instructions for learning activities, study materials, feedback to students. The second level is organisational communication, which manages administrative processes, enrolments, timetables, regulations, and communications from the office. The third level is represented by institutional communication, which builds the university's identity and reputation externally. Website, press releases, orientation materials. Three distinct levels, but not three separate islands. In fact, interactions between these three levels are constant, even if they are often not overseen. Let's take an example. An academic regulation is updated, which is at the organisational level, and this changes the instructions for a specific activity at the educational level. If this update is not communicated consistently across all channels, the student receives conflicting messages. Another situation is when an orientation initiative is communicated only on the institutional website and does not reach those students who mainly use the educational platform. The overall quality of the educational experience also depends on these connections. And this is where artificial intelligence can come to our aid, not to replace the responsibility of those who communicate, but to make the complexity of information flows more visible and manageable. For example, by checking the consistency between versions of the same document across different channels, flagging missing updates or information gaps, not in place of the decision maker, but alongside them. What happens when the communication ecosystem doesn't work properly? If we look at studies on learning in digital environments, the phenomenon of cognitive information overload comes to mind. When channels multiply without any coordination, those receiving the communications lose their bearings. It's not just about students. A funding body that finds inconsistencies between the website and the official documentation loses trust in the institution. A partner company that receives contradictory messages about deadlines and procedures starts to doubt the university's reliability. For students, the risk is even more well documented. Reports from ANVU, the National Agency for the Evaluation of the University and Research System, show that the first year is the period when the likelihood of dropping out or slowing down one's university studies increases. There are many causes: economic, motivational, academic, but among the contextual factors, information disorientation contributes to making the institution seem distant and unwelcoming. And it's not just a practical inconvenience. When a student can't find information or finds contradictory information, they feel as though their university doesn't care about them. This shows that every information gap has a relational cost, not just an operational one. Those who manage a university's communications have a clear responsibility in this regard as well. The content exists, but it isn't coordinated. How can this problem be tackled in practical terms? The first step is mapping. Before intervening in the communication ecosystem, it needs to be made visible. The map identifies, for each communication, who is communicating with whom, through which channel, for what purpose, at what point in the process, and how consistent it is with other messages circulating on the same topic. This approach is in line with what we've seen so far. If the ecosystem is made up of relationships between channels and people, improving it first requires observing those relationships. Mapping, then, allows us to identify what is really happening. You can't improve what you can't yet see. Let's try to sum up this lesson. We've seen that the university is a complex communicative organisation with 3 levels that interact and influence each other continuously. We've seen that when this network loses coherence, the consequences aren't just organisational, they become human. Students get lost, trust is eroded. And we've also opened a window onto the role of artificial intelligence, not as a substitute for professional judgment, but as a tool to support the stability of the university's communicative ecosystem.